In this video, I'm going to show you how to bend and notch tube without a tube notcher, even if you've never bent tube before. Now this method is really easy and you can use it on any type of bender that you've got. Now I use this method when I first started out in my shop. It's a 2D type of method. Now I've since moved on from there and I use software now, but you will get the exact same result using this method as if you were using that software. Now there are a ton of videos out there showing you how to bend tube, and it can be absolutely overwhelming. So I'm going to try and break this down for you step by step so that you can go out and build whatever you want to build this weekend. Now there's one more thing that I want to go over before we get into this. This takes a lot of practice. You're going to bend a lot of tube and bugger it up, overbend it, kink it, do whatever. You're going to end up with a lot of tube in a scrap heap. Keep it around because you will use it for other projects and whatever, but more to the point, you need to practice this sort of stuff. But I promise, if you stick with it and use these methods, you will get it. Step number one, you need to build yourself a cheater bar. That's one of these things here. So my cheater bar's got a whole heap of notches on it and a couple of slots in there to put your measuring tape. You use these things here to determine where you're going to put your start of bend line on your project. So first things first, we've got to build one of these. Let's do it. So first thing you want to do is you want to cut off about 1 metre of stuff. So whatever size tube that you're using, just chuck that in the saw, cut off about 1 metre of it. This is 32 nib tube, so in my case, we're going to use this. Cut off about 1 metre so that you can chuck it in the bender, bend up yourself a 90-degree bend. Yep, so we'll take up the slack now, I'll hook the air up, we'll take up the slack, we'll zero it out, and then we'll do a 90-degree bend. That's come up to 92.8 there now, it's settling into 92.8, so almost 3 degrees over 90 degrees. Now you need to allow for spring back. Now I don't know what the spring back is on this size tube because I haven't done too much of it and I haven't logged that data, so it's a really good idea to get a notepad and write down all your spring backs for the certain types of angles that you bend to. In this case 90 degrees, I'm going to 92.8. We'll double check that with our angle finder. So what we'll do is we'll slacken off the pressure on this. We'll keep this angle finder where it is. You can do this with one angle finder, 2 is better. So we'll slacken her off. So I've got that zeroed out on there. Just push the other one out of the way for now so I can get where I want it. And we're at 90.1 degrees. Now because this is the first time bending this tube, I'm going to make sure it's at 90 degrees using this roofing square. Just put it along the back side like that. And we're pretty bloody close, so I'm pretty happy with that. So now we've got our cheater piece bent up and cut to size. There's a couple of things that we need to do to it now to make it legible. You can definitely just get away with just using this piece the way it is if you're doing 90s and possibly even 45s. But what I've done with this one is I've cut a couple of notches in here and here so that you can stick your measuring tape in there and measure out to your center line or to your next bend. I've also made a dotted line right through there where the 45-degree mark is, and I've also put a line every 10 mil so that I can count how much tube is in a bend and make it a little bit easier to figure out what angle I'm actually at. So we'll go ahead and we'll just put the dotted line on there for now. You don't have to go ahead and put those lines in there, you can if you like. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to use this digital protractor. So we'll just lay it flat down on the bench like that and then zero it out while it's flat, and then when you're bending back to 45 degrees. And then what we can do is I've marked on the tube, that's the start line. So we always go from the start of bend. You sit that on there, on the flat bit, and just pull it back until it touches, which is right there. That'll be our 45-degree line. And lo and behold, it's halfway. So what I'll do now is I'll get the angle grinder and the cutting wheel, and I'll cut in 2 slots on there for us so that we can use our measuring tape. So all you need, now I haven't done this exactly spot on, but all you need is enough room in there to stick the end of your tape measure in, like that there, so you can measure out to you know, wherever. So that's all you need. And you put that mark right on where the bend line starts. I only use 90-degree ones because it's pretty much the majority of your bends are going to be within your 90 degrees. So when you're doing less than 90 degrees, you'll see that it'll butt up against whatever it is that you're measuring it to, and you can use your protractor like this, like I've marked me 45, and you'll see where it touches is right on that 45-degree mark. So you don't need to get all them other pieces, but if it helps you understand what you've got to bend, then go ahead and bend up a bunch of other different angles you can use for a cheater bar. Okay, now we've got our cheater piece made up, we can get ahead and make our template for our scale model rock slider. So with the rock slider, what we're going to do is we're going to put a 90 degree down one end and a 45 degree at the other for illustration purposes. So what I do is I use my bench. I know my bench is square because I made it. If you don't have a bench that's long enough, that's fine. You can do this down on the concrete. The point is, you need some straight lines. You can either make those yourself with a regular ruler, or you can use the edge of the bench. So the bottom of the bench for us is going to be where our straight tube's going to lie, and the end of the bench for us is going to be our limit for where we start to make our slider. So I want this miniature slider to be at least 800 mil long. So I'll just make that mark there, it doesn't have to be exact. And I want it to be 180 mil wide, like that. And we just mark that off, like so. So down this end, we're already fortunate because we've got a 90 degree end going in down here. So what I do is I take my cheater piece and I lie it up with the line and the edge of the bench. I'll make sure we're nice and square, all that kind of good stuff. And the start of the bend points towards the middle, and I'll just mark off with a bit of chalk where our starter bend's going to be. And now we've got our 90 degree mark down the end. Now we need to do our 45 degree line. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can just use a speed square like this, which is really bloody easy. You just line that up with your outer mark. So this mark down here is where we want the tube to end. So we can start with that, we'll just butt it up next to that, and we can draw our line like that. You can use a digital protractor like this and butt that up against there and draw a line down. Mine's not long enough. Or if you don't have any of that stuff, you can just measure it. You know that that's 180 mil up. So if you go 180 mil across and mark it off just here, and you go square up from that. If you use the back side of your ruler, that's actually square, you can mark it up here, and then you can see that that lines right up with that as well. So there's a couple of ways you can do your 45. Once you've got that, you've just got to use your cheater piece. Now keep in mind you've got to keep your start of bend towards the middle. So you line that up so that it butts up against the top line, and then you make sure it's nice and square like that, and you just slide it across until it butts up against your 45 degree line, and the little mark that I've got there in the middle lines straight up with it. So once you've got that, you just mark where your start of bend line is, and that's where we're going to make our bend. Now once you've got your marks put onto your template where your starter bends are, it's now time to transfer that to a piece of tube. Just take a rough guesstimate on how much tube you're going to actually need. I just measure around the outside of what I've just put down on the table, and then I give it a little bit extra. So in my case, what you've got to keep in mind too is you might need a little bit extra so it actually fits inside the bender. For me, I need an extra 200 to 300 mil so it fits onto the follow bar of the bender. So I'll keep that in mind on both ends. I'll transfer that on the bar, and we'll bend up a 90 and a 45 degree bend. We'll get it back down on the table and see if it fits. And now that we've got our length of steel, we'll just bring it back over to the bench, and we'll measure about halfway on it. 193. So we'll go 193. Probably just use that because it's easier. So now we've got our marks. We'll take this over to the bender. We'll do a 90-degree bend at one end. We'll do a 45-degree bend at the other, and we'll bring it back over to a template to see if it fits. So you might be thinking what this thing is up here. So this is put on here to set up my rotation for when I do my second bend. So I did get it on there a little bit too late, so it's probably going to be a little bit off, but we'll see how we go. So mistake number 2 that I've made is I didn't set up my bar properly for my rotation. So I set it up so when the bar was right up in the air, which isn't going to be accurate. But there is a way to get around it where you can just eyeball off the side of your bar, because I've done a 90 to the side of your die. Now I've taken a angle finder and I've put that up against there and zeroed it out, and then stuck that on here, and lo and behold, we're actually pretty bloody damn close. We are 0.2 of a degree out, so not too bad. I'm pretty happy with that. You bring it back over to your template now, just line it up with all the lines, and lo and behold, we're good. Now there are 2 ways you can do copings. You can use a template, which I've got here, and you can also do this little neat trick. So what we'll do here is we'll come to the vertical point and we'll mark down a line down the middle of the tube. We'll mark off the middle here as well, and here. And we want to go 1/3 of the tube diameter. So to eyeball that, it's probably around that. And then we connect those lines like so, as a rough guide. And that will give you your coping. You can do the same for down here. 90-degree ones are a little easier. So that's our coping right there. So I'll clean those up a little bit. They don't have to be too flash, but they will do the job. All the tube notching's done now, so this fits up quite snugly, and it's bloody spot on, to be honest. And there you have it. That's the method I use to bend tube, no matter what type of bender you got. The first thing, remember, that you've got to do is make yourself up a cheater piece. This will tell you how much tube you're going to use in the bend. Good luck. Get out there and start bending.